In 1971, my mother was a college student at Harvard, right as it was going co-ed. Women were now equal in the classroom, but women still weren't allowed to use the school's swimming pool, and my mother wanted to swim. So she and her friends marched into the athletic director's office and demanded that the pool be integrated. "Impossible," said the athletic director. "Women couldn't use the pool," he said, "because the men swim naked." "The men swim naked," he said, "and besides, there was no women's locker room. The pool had always been men only, and it would simply have to remain that way." Well, then my mother and her friends tried a different approach. They said if women were allowed to use the pool, not in any kind of permanent way, but as an experiment for a semester, can you think of ways to make that experiment happen? Well, the athletic director thought for a little while, and he said, "Well, I guess we could ask the men to wear swimsuits." And he thought a little more and said, "You know, we do have a second locker room for the visiting swim teams when they come to compete against Harvard. I guess the women could use that locker room." So they tried this crazy experiment, and the sky didn't fall, and men and women have been using the pool together ever since. And 30 years later, when I myself went to Harvard, I did not see a single naked man in that swimming pool. I'm sure this made my mother happy on many levels. Framing things as an experiment freed the athletic director's mind, allowing him to come up with a novel solution without feeling like his world was crashing down around him. Experiments are not just a great way of getting new information. They're also a way of opening ourselves up to new ideas and new experiences. So today, I would like to talk to you about the beauty of testing. I want to tell you about how testing helped me free my mind and how it can free your mind as well. On the 2012 Barack Obama campaign, I was the director of digital analytics, and I saw firsthand how our organization's strong culture of testing really helped us, especially with our online fundraising operation. Nearly all of our digital communications went through a rigorous gauntlet of randomized controlled experiments. And in the online world, we usually call these A/B tests. And let me give you an example of what this means. So pretend for a moment that all of you in this room want to donate to the Barack Obama campaign. So you come to our website and you click on the button that's going to take you to our donation page. We can use a little snippet of code to divide you into two groups. This side of the audience, we're going to call you Group A, and you're going to see this page. You'll have to fill out a bunch of information in all those fields, and then click the donate button at the bottom of the page. This side of the room, you're going to be Group B, and you'll still have to fill in all the same information, but only a little bit at a time. On this new donation page, you have to say how much you want to donate, then it flips you to another tab where you enter in a little more information, and so on, until finally you hit the donation button at the end of that sequence. Now, whether you were assigned page A or page B, not all of you would actually complete the donation process. Some of you would get bored, some of you might not have your credit card handy. Neither one of these two pages is going to have a 100% completion rate. But if you in this room behaved the way our website visitors did when we first ran this test, about 5% more of you on this side of the room would actually complete the donation process versus those of you on this side of the room. In other words, the experiment told us that our new donation page was better than our old donation page because we had shown each one to an equivalent group of people and gotten significantly better results from one versus the other. Now, if you're thinking that 5% doesn't sound like any big deal, I understand. It's kind of a small effect size. But it's important to remember that when we implemented this new page, after that point, we raised a few $100 million in donations. And 5% of a few $100 million starts to be real money. I should also mention that after we implemented this new page, we weren't done with the testing process. our website development team continued to test and tweak and find new ways to improve this page. And if that sounds daunting, I understand, because it was actually a lot of work. But on the other hand, it was sort of liberating to know that we didn't have to get things perfectly right from the start. The nice thing about testing is that you can start with a new product or a new web page and just continue improving through testing. Well, on the Obama campaign, we had the opinion that everything should be tested. We tested our web pages, our text messages, our online ads, even a lot of our offline communication as well. But in our email program, that's where we got particularly complex. You see, millions of people had signed up for the Barack Obama campaign's email list, and that meant we had the sample size to test out lots of different messages before we sent each full list email. Here's an example. So at the end of August of 2012, we were about to send out a fundraising email. And we had 6 different possible drafts that our email team had written that we could send out to the list. All of these 6 drafts mentioned an upcoming fundraising deadline, but each draft had a slightly different flavor. The first one mentions the party conventions that were happening around that time. The second one talks about our opponent, Mitt Romney. The third one is fairly long, but it talks about how the other side is going to spend more money than we would. The fourth one is very personal, talking about how it was Barack Obama's last campaign. The fifth one mentions that the election is getting closer, and finally the sixth one talks about collective action, how we all needed to come together to re-elect the president. None of these messages contradicted the others, they were just, different flavors. Then, in addition to all of these different drafts, we would also test out different subject lines, usually about 3 subject lines per draft. So in this case, we ended up with 18 different versions of this email. And we sent each one of those 18 versions out to about 1% of our list. We were looking for the email that would get us the most people to click on the link and finally donate to the campaign. And this is what the results looked like. There was considerable variation across all 18 versions of the email. In fact, the email that won, which happened to be the one mentioning Barack Obama's last campaign, that got over twice as many donations as the worst performing email among this bunch of 18. Now, this was really good news for us because at this point, we've only used up about 20% of our list running these tests. That means we have 80% of our list left over to actually send that one really good winning email to. And once we did, we raised about $3.7 million just from this one email. If we had sent the worst version among these 18 different variations, we would have raised about $2 million less for the campaign. So it was really good that we did all that testing, because without it, we wouldn't have known what was the best and what was the worst. Believe me, we actually had a betting pool within the office to see if anyone could accurately predict what would win and what would lose. Because obviously, if we had perfect foresight, we wouldn't have to do all this testing. I mean, it was extra work. It would have been nice to avoid that. But turns out we were terrible at predicting the winners and losers. I think we were actually worse than flipping a coin. And what that told us is that if even the experts can't accurately predict what messages will win and lose, it's just that much more important to do a lot of testing and let the data tell us the answer. I found this testing process to be very freeing, even comforting in a weird way, because I knew that if I had an idea that seemed a little crazy, it wasn't a hard sell to my colleagues to say, hey, guys, let's just try this out on a small piece of our list. Venturing into uncharted waters is a lot easier if you only have to dip a toe in first. Of course, sometimes our crazy ideas turned out to be brilliant, and that was always a very nice feeling. There's nothing quite so awesome as being right and having the data to prove it. Of course, sometimes we were wrong. For instance, one time, I had this idea that we should make our emails look prettier. I had noticed that our emails were looking kind of plain, and we had this beautiful website, so I thought, why don't we make our emails look more like our website? So we tried it. We put some nice-looking buttons into the email, generally made the email look more like those donation pages I showed you. And that failed. Making our emails prettier did not increase donation rates, and my instincts were proven wrong. Really, testing is an incredibly good cure for egotism, I found. But the great thing about testing is now we were free to think of new ideas and new theories. If pretty doesn't work, how about ugly? Can we make our emails uglier? So we tried it. We did a test where we added ugly yellow highlighting to certain parts of the email, and that actually got us significantly better results. From the failure of our first experiment, we achieved success with our second experiment. And we found this over and over, that testing really allows you to fail upwards. Of course, before you all run out and start sending ugly emails to all of your friends, I should mention that the novelty of this ugly yellow highlighting eventually wore off. And this is also something that we found throughout the campaign. Tactics that would test well at one point wouldn't necessarily test well later. And so we always had to be coming up with new ideas and new innovations. Well, we're here today in Athens, and certainly the scientific method owes a lot to the great thinkers of ancient Greece. But you don't have to be an ancient philosopher or even a modern scientist to use the scientific method in your own life. Look around you and free your mind. Is there anything in your life that you could turn into an experiment? Say, for instance, that you're someone who uses online dating services, and you've got a pretty standard pickup line that you like to use. Maybe something like this guy who messaged me recently. "You're a very beautiful woman." Flattering, yes, but it's not very original. It's pretty boring and impersonal. So maybe you decide you need something a little bit better than this, or at least something different. So maybe you want to try something like this other guy who also messaged me recently. "Do you own a crock pot?" Now, if this is something that doesn't translate, a crock pot is a type of electric cooking device. It's not something that comes up in romantic conversations very much, which actually makes "do you own a crock pot" a pretty unique and original pickup line. But it's also pretty weird. And certainly, if you're trying to decide between these two pickup lines, it's not actually clear which one is better. So you could test them. Every time you were online and you saw someone that you wanted to flirt with, you could flip a coin and send that person either your original pickup line or your new crockpot pickup line. And I think before too long, you would probably start to see one of these lines get more positive responses than the other. Or maybe another possibility here is that neither of these is any good whatsoever, and you really need to free your mind to come up with better pickup lines. If you're looking for more serious examples, certainly the business world has a lot of examples to offer. Testing happens all the time in the business world, and there was a great example a few years ago when some researchers worked with a major hotel chain to test out different ways of asking the hotel's guests to reuse their towels rather than having the hotel staff wash them every day. You might have seen these little cards in hotel bathrooms where they ask you to save the environment by reusing your towels. Well, the researchers tested that and randomly divided guests to receive either that environmental message or a different message that simply said that reusing towels was the popular thing to do. They were just told that most other guests in their hotel had chosen to reuse their towels. And that second message, the one with a social pressure, that actually worked significantly better than the environmental message. So if you own a business or you're thinking about starting one, think about ways that you can adopt the testing mentality into your business. Think about ways that you can use testing to improve your profits or improve your customer service. Let testing be something that inspires you to innovate. Well, as you look around your life and think about ways to incorporate experiments, let me leave you with these 5 suggestions. These are my 5 ways to use testing to free your mind. Number 1, start somewhere. if you force yourself to be perfect right from the start, whatever the project, you're probably going to be more risk-averse and less creative. The great thing about testing is that it frees you from this pressure because you know that no matter where you start, you're always going to be able to keep improving through testing. Number 2, fail upwards. On the Obama campaign, we had to learn to be humble because a lot of times testing would prove our instincts wrong. But on the other hand, we also had to learn that failure is just another opportunity to consider new ideas. Number 3, test all the time. If you make it a priority to do testing anytime the opportunity presents itself, you will start coming up with more creative ideas just to meet those opportunities. On the Obama campaign, we had kept a testing calendar, and anytime we saw a blank space in that calendar, we knew it was time for a brainstorm session. Testing all the time forced us to be more innovative. Number 4, surround yourself with diverse perspectives. The people on my digital analytics team on the campaign came from all sorts of different backgrounds. We had people who had worked in politics, but also people from computer science and financial analysis and marketing, and even, no joke, particle physics. What this meant is that we all had different approaches to the testing process, and we ended up learning a lot from each other. So as you seek to incorporate testing into your life, make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who have different perspectives, maybe even different agendas. Certainly the athletic director at Harvard found that out when my mother came into his office. It's good to get different perspectives. And then finally, trust in testing. After the campaign ended, people would always come up to me and say, Amelia, can you tell us, what did you learn on the campaign that we can use in our campaign? Well, the truth is, there are no universal best practices. Positive test results don't last forever, and what works in one context may not work in another context. The only true best practice is testing itself. So get out there and do some testing. It will free your mind. Thank you very much. Ευχαριστώ.